My mom's best friend moved in to help while mom was dying of cancer, but I discovered she was actually planning to steal my father and our family fortune. Subscribe to the channel and like the video to see more stories like this 28 years old. That number represents resilience, determination, and the strength I inherited from my mother. My name is Sarah, and for the past 6 years, I've been working as a pediatric nurse in Portland, Oregon. My family's Victorian house on Elm Street has always been our sanctuary, a symbol of everything my parents built together over 30 years of marriage. The wraparound porch where mom used to sit with her morning coffee, the garden she tended with such care, the family photos lining every hallway. This house held our entire world. My mother, Linda, was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer 18 months ago. At 52, she was supposed to have decades ahead of her. Instead, we were told she had maybe a year if we were lucky. Dad, Michael, a successful real estate developer, immediately took a leave of absence to care for her. I moved back home from my apartment downtown to help with her daily needs. Throughout mom's illness, her best friend since childhood, Rebecca Martinez, became an almost permanent fixture in our house. Rebecca was 48, recently divorced, and claimed she wanted to help our family through this difficult time. She had been mom's maid of honor, godmother to me, and someone I had called Aunt Becca my entire life. Sarah, honey, Rebecca is such a blessing, mom would say, her voice weak from the chemotherapy. I don't know what we'd do without her. Rebecca seemed to appear whenever we needed her most. She'd arrive with homemade meals, offer to drive mom to appointments, and stay late into the evening helping with household tasks. She was attentive, caring, and always seemed to know exactly what our family needed. Michael, you look exhausted, Rebecca would tell my father during those long nights. Why don't you let me stay with Linda tonight? You need to rest. At first, I was grateful for Rebecca's presence. Watching your mother slowly fade away is devastating, and having extra help seemed like a gift. Rebecca had lost her own mother to cancer 5 years earlier, so she understood our pain in ways others couldn't. But something started feeling different about 3 months ago. I began noticing small things that didn't quite sit right with me. Rebecca started arriving earlier each morning, sometimes before I was even awake. She'd already have coffee made and breakfast prepared by the time Dad came downstairs. She knew where everything was in our kitchen better than I did, despite the fact that this had been my childhood home. Rebecca's been such a help with the grocery shopping. Dad mentioned one evening, she knows exactly what your mother needs. I found it odd that Rebecca had taken over the grocery shopping entirely. When I offered to help, she'd insist she had it handled. She'd return with bags full of items, many of which seemed more suited to Dad's preferences than mom's dietary restrictions from her treatment. Then there were the clothes. Rebecca, who had always dressed casually in jeans and sweaters during her visits over the years, suddenly started wearing more fashionable outfits. She'd arrive in carefully coordinated outfits, with her hair and makeup done perfectly, even for what were supposed to be caregiving duties. You look nice today, Becca, I commented one morning. Oh, this old thing. She laughed, smoothing down a dress I'd never seen before. I just want to look presentable when I'm helping out. But the most unsettling change was how she interacted with my father. Rebecca had always been friendly with Dad, but lately, her behavior seemed different. She'd touch his arm when they talked, laugh a little too loudly at his comments, and find reasons to be in whatever room he was in. During one of Mom's particularly bad days, when she was sleeping most of the time, I walked into the kitchen to find Rebecca and Dad standing very close together by the coffee maker. They jumped apart when they saw me, and Rebecca quickly busied herself with wiping down already clean counters. How's Mom doing? Dad asked, his face slightly flushed. She's resting, I replied, studying both of their expressions. Good, good, Rebecca added quickly. Rest is so important for her recovery. Except we all knew Mom wasn't going to recover. The doctors had been clear about that from the beginning. I started paying closer attention to Rebecca's behavior around Dad. She'd volunteer to help him with tasks that really didn't require 2 people. When Dad would come home from running errands, Rebecca always seemed to time her arrival perfectly to greet him at the door. She'd ask about his day with the kind of interest that seemed more personal than familial. Michael works so hard, Rebecca would say to me. He's such a devoted husband and father. Your mother is lucky to have him. These comments, while seemingly innocent, began to feel loaded with meaning I couldn't quite identify. One afternoon, while Mom was napping and Dad was at a brief meeting with his business partner, I decided to do some cleaning around the house. In the guest bathroom that Rebecca frequently used, I found several expensive skincare products that definitely weren't there before. These weren't drugstore items. They were high-end creams and serums that cost more than what most people spend on groceries in a week. When I mentioned the products to Rebecca later, she seemed embarrassed. Oh, those are mine. I hope you don't mind that I left them here. I've been spending so much time helping out that I thought it would be easier to keep some things here, rather than constantly packing and unpacking. It was a reasonable explanation, but something about it felt rehearsed. That evening, as I was helping Mom get ready for bed, she squeezed my hand with what little strength she had left. Sarah, I need to tell you something important, she whispered. Promise me you'll take care of your father when I'm gone. He's going to need so much support, and I worry about him being alone. Mom, don't talk like that, I said, though we both knew her time was running short. No, listen to me. Your father is a good man, but he's not good at being alone. Promise me you'll make sure he's okay. Make sure he makes good decisions about who he lets into his life. At the time, I thought she was just worried about Dad's emotional well-being after her death. Now I wonder if she sensed something I was only beginning to notice. That night, I lay in my childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling, and trying to make sense of the growing unease I felt about Rebecca's constant presence in our house. Part of me felt guilty for questioning the motives of someone who was supposedly helping our family during the most difficult time of our lives. But another part of me couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right about the way Rebecca looked at my father, or the way she'd positioned herself as indispensable to our family's daily functioning. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of quiet laughter coming from downstairs. When I reached the kitchen, I found Rebecca and Dad sitting at the breakfast table together, their heads bent close over what appeared to be paperwork. They were so engrossed in their conversation that they didn't notice me standing in the doorway. Rebecca's hand was resting on Dad's arm as she pointed to something on the papers, and the intimacy of the gesture made my stomach turn. This wasn't the way a family friend comforts a grieving husband. This was something else entirely. When they finally noticed me, Rebecca quickly moved her hand and gathered up the papers. "Good morning, sweetheart," Dad said, his voice unnaturally cheerful. "Rebecca was just helping me organize some of the medical bills." "Medical bills?" I asked, moving closer to the table. "Nothing for you to worry about," Rebecca said quickly, sliding the papers into a folder. "Just insurance paperwork. Your dad has enough on his plate without having to deal with all the administrative details." But as she closed the folder, I caught a glimpse of what looked like real estate documents, not medical bills at all. As Rebecca left that morning, she hugged Dad goodbye in a way that lasted just a few seconds too long. I watched from the window as she got into her car, and I could swear I saw her blow a kiss toward the house before driving away. That's when I realized that my mother's best friend might not be the angel of mercy we all thought she was. Over the following weeks, Rebecca's behavior became increasingly bold. She started arriving at our house earlier each morning, sometimes as early as 6 a.m., claiming she wanted to help prepare Mom's medication before Dad left for his brief work meetings. But Mom rarely woke up before 9 a.m. due to her pain medication schedule. "I thought I'd get the house ready for Linda's day," Rebecca would explain when I questioned her early arrivals. "You know how she likes everything to be perfect." But when I checked on these so-called preparations, I'd find Rebecca in the kitchen making elaborate breakfasts that were clearly too rich for Mom's sensitive stomach. Instead, these meals seemed designed for Dad's tastes: his favorite coffee blend, eggs Benedict the way he liked them, fresh fruit arranged in patterns that Mom would never have the energy to appreciate. Rebecca had also somehow obtained a key to our house. When I asked Dad about it, he seemed uncomfortable. "She needed access for emergencies," he explained, not meeting my eyes. "What if something happened to your mother when we weren't here?" "Dad, I live here now. I'm always here." "Well, it's just, Rebecca has been so helpful." It made sense at the time, but I had never been consulted about giving our family friend a key to our home. This was a decision made between Rebecca and Dad, without including me or even discussing it with Mom. I started documenting Rebecca's visits in a small notebook I kept hidden in my room. She came every single day, usually staying between 8 and 10 hours. On weekends, she'd arrive Saturday morning and wouldn't leave until Sunday evening. Her presence had become constant, almost suffocating. During Mom's doctor appointments, Rebecca had somehow positioned herself as the primary contact person. I discovered this when Dr. Peterson, Mom's oncologist, called the house and asked to speak with Mrs. Martinez about Linda's treatment options. "I think there's been a mistake," I told Dr. Peterson. "Rebecca Martinez isn't family. She's just a family friend." "Oh, I apologize," Dr. Peterson said, sounding confused. "Mrs. Martinez has been the one calling with questions and updates. She said she was handling the family's medical communications." When I confronted Rebecca about this, she seemed flustered for the first time since Mom's diagnosis. "Sarah, honey, your father asked me to help coordinate things," she said, wringing her hands. "He's so overwhelmed, and you're busy with your own work. I was just trying to take some pressure off both of you. But you're not authorized to receive medical information about my mother." "Of course not. I would never overstep. I was just trying to help organize appointment schedules and things like that." But when I called Dr. Peterson back, he confirmed that Rebecca had been asking detailed questions about Mom's prognosis, treatment timeline, and what to expect in the final stages. These weren't questions about scheduling. They were questions about when my mother was going to die. Rebecca's physical appearance continued to evolve as well. She had lost weight, updated her hairstyle, and seemed to have invested in an entirely new wardrobe. The casual, motherly woman who had been coming to our house for years had transformed into someone who looked like she was constantly dressed for a date. "Rebecca, you look wonderful," Mom commented weakly one afternoon. "Have you been taking care of yourself?" "Oh, Linda, you're so sweet," Rebecca replied, smoothing her hair. "I've just been trying to stay healthy so I can be strong for your family." But I noticed Rebecca only seemed to put extra effort into her appearance on days when Dad would be home. On the rare occasions when Dad was out all day and it was just Mom and me, Rebecca would show up in sweatpants and a t-shirt, looking like the old Rebecca I remembered. The most disturbing development was how Rebecca had begun inserting herself into family decisions. When Dad mentioned that he was considering hiring a professional home care nurse to help with Mom's more intensive needs, Rebecca immediately volunteered. "Michael, why would you want strangers in your house during such a personal time?" she argued. "I'm practically family. I know Linda's routines. I know what she needs. A stranger would just add stress to an already difficult situation." "But Rebecca, you're not medically trained," I pointed out. "Mom needs specialized care now." "I've been caring for Linda for months," Rebecca snapped, showing irritation for the first time. "I think I know what she needs better than some stranger with a nursing degree." Her comment stung, since I was literally a nurse with years of experience in patient care. But Dad seemed swayed by her argument. "Rebecca does know your mother's preferences," Dad said slowly, "and it would be more comfortable for Linda to have familiar faces around." I couldn't believe Dad was seriously considering having Rebecca provide medical care for Mom instead of hiring qualified professionals. But even more troubling was the way Rebecca smiled triumphantly when Dad agreed to postpone hiring outside help. Around this time, I started noticing changes in our household finances. Bills that were usually paid automatically seemed to be falling behind. When I asked Dad about it, he seemed distracted. "Rebecca's been helping me organize the finances," he said. "There's just so much paperwork with the medical expenses." "Dad, I can help with that. I've been managing my own finances for years." No. Rebecca has it handled. She used to work in accounting before her divorce, remember? She knows what she's doing. But I didn't remember Rebecca ever working in accounting. As far as I knew, she had been a stay-at-home mom during her marriage and had worked part-time in retail after her divorce. When had she become qualified to manage our family's finances? That evening, I tried to access our family's online banking to check on our accounts. The password had been changed. When I asked Dad about it, he seemed genuinely surprised. "I didn't change anything," he said, frowning. "Rebecca said there might be security issues with the old password. She helped me update everything to make sure our accounts were protected." "Dad, why does Rebecca have access to our banking information at all?" "She doesn't have access," he said defensively. "She just helped me set up better security measures." But if Rebecca had helped him change the passwords, then she obviously knew what the new passwords were. I felt sick thinking about how much access she now had to our family's financial information. The final incident that convinced me something was seriously wrong happened on a Thursday evening in late October. Mom had been having a particularly difficult day, sleeping most of the time and barely eating. Dad had gone to the pharmacy to pick up her new pain medication, and I was in the kitchen preparing a light dinner. I heard voices coming from the living room and assumed Mom had woken up and Rebecca was talking with her. But when I moved closer to listen, I realized the voices were coming from Dad's home office, not from Mom's bedroom. Rebecca was on the phone and she was talking about our house. "The property is in excellent condition," she was saying in a low voice, Victorian style, completely updated, probably worth around $800,000 in the current market. "The owner is very motivated to sell." I crept closer to the office door, my heart pounding. "No, he's not ready to list it yet, but he will be soon," Rebecca continued. "It's a difficult situation, but once his wife passes, he'll want to start fresh somewhere new. Too many memories in this house, you know." She was talking to what sounded like a real estate agent about selling our family home that Dad had never mentioned wanting to sell, our family home where Mom was currently dying. "Yes, I have his full authorization to discuss the property," Rebecca was saying. "I'm handling all of his affairs during this difficult time." I backed away from the door, my hands shaking. Rebecca was planning to sell our house while my mother was still alive. She had somehow convinced Dad to give her authority over his real estate decisions, and she was already making plans for after Mom's death. When Dad returned from the pharmacy, I pulled him aside and told him what I had overheard. His face went pale. "That's impossible, Sarah. Rebecca wouldn't do something like that without discussing it with me first." "Dad, I heard her. She was talking to someone about selling the house. She said she had your authorization." I did mention to her that I might want a fresh start after your mother." He trailed off, looking confused, but I never asked her to contact anyone about it. When we confronted Rebecca, she had a ready explanation. "Oh, Michael, I'm so sorry for the confusion," she said, placing her hand on Dad's arm. "I was just making some preliminary inquiries. You mentioned feeling overwhelmed about all the decisions you'll eventually need to make, so I thought I'd gather some information to help you when you're ready." "But you told them he was motivated to sell," I said. "No, I said he might be eventually. I was just trying to understand the market so I could advise Michael properly when the time comes." Dad seemed to accept this explanation, but I didn't. Rebecca was laying groundwork for decisions that should have been made by our family, not by her. She was positioning herself as Dad's advisor and representative in matters that were none of her business. That night, after Rebecca left and Dad had gone to bed, I sat with Mom during one of her wakeful periods. Mom, are you aware that Rebecca has been making calls about possibly selling the house? Mom's eyes focused on me with more clarity than I'd seen in weeks. What do you mean? She whispered. I told her about the phone conversation I'd overheard. Mom's expression shifted from confusion to something that looked like fear. Sarah, there's something I need to tell you, she said, gripping my hand with surprising strength. I've been noticing things too. The way Rebecca looks at your father, the way she touches him when she thinks I'm not aware. I confronted her about it last week. You did? What did she say? She denied it, of course, but then she said something that chilled me to the bone. She said that when I was gone, she would make sure your father wasn't alone. She said she would take care of him the way I couldn't anymore. Mom's breathing became labored from the effort of talking, but she continued. I asked her what she meant by that, and she just smiled. She said that your father was going to need someone who understood him, someone who could help him move forward with his life. She said I shouldn't worry about him because she would make sure he was happy. The implications of Rebecca's words sent ice through my veins. She wasn't just planning to comfort Dad after Mom's death, she was planning to replace her. Mom, why didn't you tell Dad about this conversation? I tried, honey, but every time I bring up concerns about Rebecca, your father defends her. He says she's just being caring, that I'm reading too much into innocent gestures because I'm not thinking clearly from the medication. Mom was right. Dad had become protective of Rebecca, dismissive of any criticism about her behavior. It was as if Rebecca had somehow made herself indispensable to him, while making Mom seem paranoid and unreasonable. There's something else, Mom continued weakly. Rebecca asked me about my jewelry last week. She wanted to know which pieces had the most sentimental value, which ones your father had given me. She said she was just curious about our love story, but the way she asked, it felt like she was taking inventory. As Mom drifted back to sleep, I realized that Rebecca's plan was far more comprehensive than I had initially understood. She wasn't just positioning herself to comfort Dad after Mom's death. She was systematically inserting herself into every aspect of our family's life, so that when Mom died, Rebecca would already be established as the woman who ran our household, managed our finances, and held Dad's emotional dependence. Rebecca Martinez wasn't helping our family through a crisis. She was orchestrating the perfect takeover of my father's life, and she was doing it while my mother lay dying just upstairs. The next morning, I decided to conduct my own investigation into Rebecca's activities. While she was upstairs with Mom and Dad had left for a quick meeting with his lawyer about Mom's will, I searched through the papers Rebecca had been organizing in Dad's office. What I found made my blood run cold. Hidden beneath seemingly innocent medical bills and insurance documents, I discovered a folder labeled Future Planning. Inside were detailed financial projections for Dad's assets after Mom's death, research on the best times to sell real estate in our neighborhood, and most shocking of all, printed emails between Rebecca and a divorce attorney discussing protecting assets during emotional decision-making periods. The emails revealed that Rebecca had been researching how to help someone make major financial decisions while grieving. But these weren't general inquiries. They specifically mentioned a recently widowed man with significant real estate holdings who might need guidance from a trusted friend to avoid making costly emotional mistakes. She was literally planning how to manage Dad's grief to her advantage. But the most damning document was a handwritten note in Rebecca's distinctive script. Timeline. Linda likely has 2 to 3 months. House evaluation complete. Michael trusts my judgment on financial matters. Sarah suspicious, but Michael dismisses her concerns. Need to establish legal authority before L passes. Rebecca had been tracking my mother's decline and planning her strategy accordingly. She had turned my mother's death into a business plan. I photographed everything with my phone before carefully replacing the documents exactly as I'd found them. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the camera steady. That afternoon, Rebecca arrived with what she claimed was a surprise for Mom, a beautiful silk scarf that must have cost at least $200. Rebecca, this is too expensive, Mom protested weakly. Nonsense, Linda. You deserve beautiful things. Besides, the color will look lovely on you when you're feeling better. But Mom wasn't going to get better, and we all knew it. The expensive gift felt like a mockery of Mom's condition. Later, when Rebecca thought no one was watching, I saw her take several photos of Mom wearing the scarf. It was almost like she was creating evidence of her generosity. That evening, I overheard a phone conversation that confirmed my worst suspicions. Rebecca was in the guest bathroom, speaking in hushed tones to someone she called Miguel. No, mi amor, just a little longer, she was saying in Spanish. The situation is almost resolved. Once the wife passes, I'll have everything in place. The husband already depends on me for everything. My high school Spanish was rusty, but I understood enough to realize that Rebecca was talking to a romantic partner about her plans for Dad. She had a boyfriend who was aware of her scheme to seduce a grieving widower. The daughter is suspicious, but the father thinks she's just emotional about her mother's condition, Rebecca continued. He trusts me completely now. Soon I'll have access to everything, the house, the business, all of it. I felt sick. Rebecca wasn't just planning to comfort Dad after Mom's death. She was conducting an elaborate con game with the help of an accomplice. The next day, I decided to do some research on Rebecca's background. I had always taken her stories about her life at face value, but now I needed to verify everything she had told us. Using my laptop, I started with basic internet searches. What I discovered was disturbing. Rebecca Martinez had indeed been married, but her divorce hadn't been the amicable split she had described to our family. Court records showed a contentious divorce where her ex-husband had accused her of financial manipulation and emotional abuse. More troubling, I found evidence that Rebecca had been involved with at least 2 other men since her divorce, both significantly older, both recently widowed, and both with substantial assets. In one case, a man named Robert Chen had filed a restraining order against Rebecca after accusing her of fraudulent manipulation of his finances while he was grieving his wife's death. The pattern was clear. Rebecca targeted vulnerable widowers and used their grief to manipulate them into giving her access to their money and property. Armed with this information, I tried again to warn Dad about Rebecca's true nature. I showed him the court documents on my laptop, explained what I had overheard, and begged him to see what was really happening. Dad's reaction was not what I expected. "Sarah, I'm very disappointed in you," he said, his voice colder than I had ever heard it. "Your mother is dying, and instead of supporting our family during this difficult time, you're creating conspiracy theories about someone who has been nothing but kind to us." "Dad, please just look at the evidence." "I don't want to hear it," he interrupted. "Rebecca has been here for us every single day. She sacrificed her own time and energy to help care for your mother. The fact that you would repay that kindness by investigating her like she's some kind of criminal is frankly disgusting." I was stunned by the vehemence of Dad's defense of Rebecca. It was as if she had become more important to him than his own daughter's concerns. "Rebecca told me you might react this way," Dad continued. "She warned me that grief can make people paranoid and suspicious. She said you might start imagining threats where none exist." Rebecca had anticipated my investigation and had already planted seeds in Dad's mind to discredit anything I might discover. She had manipulated him so thoroughly that he was now viewing me as the problem, not her. That evening, Rebecca confronted me directly for the first time. She found me in the kitchen after Dad had gone to bed. "Sarah, we need to talk," she said, her friendly demeanor completely gone. "What about?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I know you've been going through Michael's office. I know you've been asking questions about me. I want you to understand something very clearly. You are not going to interfere with what's happening here." The mask had finally slipped. The caring family friend was gone, replaced by someone cold and calculating. "What's happening here is that my mother is dying while you manipulate my father," I said. "Your father is a grown man who can make his own decisions," Rebecca replied, "and he's decided that he needs my support. Your mother will be gone soon, and Michael will need someone to help him rebuild his life. That someone is going to be me, whether you like it or not." "Over my dead body," Rebecca smiled, and it was one of the most chilling expressions I had ever seen. "Sarah, you need to think very carefully about what you're saying. Your father trusts me completely. Your mother is too sick to contradict anything I tell her. If you continue to cause problems, I can very easily convince Michael that you're having an emotional breakdown from the stress of your mother's illness. I can suggest that you need professional help, that you shouldn't be around your dying mother when you're clearly not stable." The threat was clear. Rebecca was prepared to have me removed from my own family home if I continued to oppose her. "You're underestimating how much control I already have over this situation," she continued. "I know all of Michael's passwords, I have access to his accounts, and I've already established myself as his primary support system. The transition after Linda's death will be seamless because I've been preparing for it for months." "Why are you doing this?" I asked. "Because I can," Rebecca said simply. "Because Michael is a successful, wealthy man who will be emotionally vulnerable and financially generous after his wife dies. Because this house is worth nearly $1 million, and he'll be grateful to have someone help him start fresh. Because some people work hard for what they want, and others just wait for the right opportunity." She moved closer to me, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Your mother was always too trusting, too naive. She never suspected that her best friend might want the life she had. She welcomed me into your home, shared every detail of your family's finances, and even asked me to take care of Michael when she's gone. She literally gave me permission to take her place." The cruelty of what Rebecca was saying took my breath away. She had been planning this betrayal for months, possibly years, while pretending to love and support my mother. "Linda made this easy for me," Rebecca continued. "Every time she asked me to help with Michael's needs, every time she expressed worry about him being alone, she was basically handing me the blueprint for replacing her. And the beautiful part is that when she's gone, Michael will think it was her dying wish for us to be together." I realized that Rebecca had been grooming both of my parents for this moment. She had made Dad dependent on her while convincing Mom that she was acting out of love and loyalty. "You have 2 choices, Sarah," Rebecca said, straightening up. "You can accept reality and stop interfering, or you can continue to fight me and watch as I destroy your relationship with your father. Because make no mistake, Michael will choose me over you if forced to pick sides. I've made sure of that. After Rebecca left that night, I sat in my room trying to process everything that had happened. She was right about one thing. Dad had already chosen her over me. My attempts to warn him had only strengthened his belief that Rebecca was the victim of my unfounded suspicions. But I couldn't just let Rebecca destroy my family without a fight. Mom was still alive, even if barely, and she deserved to know the truth about her best friend's betrayal. Dad might not believe me, but maybe there was still a way to expose Rebecca's scheme before it was too late. I started formulating a plan. If Rebecca thought she had already won, maybe it was time to let her believe that while I gathered the evidence I needed to prove her manipulation to Dad in a way he couldn't dismiss or explain away. Rebecca Martinez had underestimated me just as much as she had underestimated the strength of the family bonds she was trying to destroy. It was time to show her exactly how wrong she was. My plan required patience and precision. I knew I had only one chance to expose Rebecca before she could convince Dad that I was having a breakdown. I needed evidence so overwhelming that even Dad's manipulated loyalty to Rebecca couldn't explain it away. Over the next week, I pretended to accept defeat. I apologized to Dad for my paranoid behavior and told Rebecca I understood that she was just trying to help our family. Rebecca seemed pleased by my apparent surrender, which made her careless. With Rebecca believing she had neutralized the threat I posed, she became bolder in her actions. She started staying overnight more frequently, claiming that Mom needed round-the-clock care. During one of these overnight stays, I heard her sneaking out of the guest room at 2 a.m. and moving toward Dad's bedroom. I quietly followed her and watched through a crack in the door as she slipped into Dad's room. I couldn't see exactly what happened, but I could hear whispered conversation and the sound of the bed creaking. When she emerged 20 minutes later, Dad was still whispering her name. The next morning, Dad seemed different, more attentive to Rebecca, more distant from me. Rebecca had moved their relationship to a physical level, while my mother lay dying one room away. I needed proof that would be undeniable, so I decided to record everything. Using my phone, I started documenting every inappropriate interaction between Rebecca and Dad. I recorded her going into his bedroom at night, captured audio of their intimate conversations, and photographed the way she positioned herself in our house as if she already lived there. But the smoking gun came when I overheard Rebecca on another phone call with Miguel. This time I was ready with my phone's recording app. "Sí, mi amor, everything is going perfectly," Rebecca said in Spanish. "The old woman has maybe 2 weeks left, and then we'll have everything. The house, the business, all of it." "And the daughter?" Miguel asked. "She's been neutralized. The father thinks she's emotionally unstable. When Linda dies, I'll suggest that Sarah needs professional help to deal with her grief. Michael will probably pay for her to go to some expensive treatment facility just to get her out of the way." "You're brilliant, mi vida. How much do you think we'll get for the house?" "At least $800, Ziran, maybe more. And Michael's construction business is worth over $2 million. Once we're married, I'll have access to everything. Then we can sell it all and move to Costa Rica like we planned." I almost dropped the phone. Rebecca wasn't just planning to seduce Dad. She and Miguel intended to marry him, steal everything he had, and then disappear to another country. Dad wasn't going to be Rebecca's new love. He was going to be her mark in an elaborate international fraud scheme. "What about the will?" Miguel asked. "I've already planted seeds about changing it. I told Michael that Sarah seems unstable and might not be capable of handling an inheritance responsibly. He's starting to think that leaving everything to her might not be wise. I suggested that he might want to consider other options for securing his legacy. They were planning to cut me out of Dad's will entirely." "When do we make our move?" Miguel asked. "As soon as Linda dies and the initial grief period passes, maybe 3 months. Michael will be so grateful for my support during his darkest time that he'll do whatever I suggest. Men are so predictable when they're emotional." I had everything I needed. Rebecca had confessed to an elaborate fraud scheme designed to steal my father's entire life savings while using my mother's death as the perfect cover. But I knew that simply playing the recording for Dad wouldn't be enough. Rebecca had so thoroughly manipulated him that he would probably claim the recording was fake or taken out of context. I needed to expose her in a way that would be impossible to deny or rationalize. 3 days later, the opportunity presented itself. Mom had taken a turn for the worse and was sleeping almost constantly. Dad was emotionally fragile, and Rebecca was taking full advantage of his vulnerability. She had basically moved into our house full-time, claiming that Dad needed her constant support. That evening, Rebecca made a critical mistake. She answered Dad's phone when Dr. Peterson called with an update about Mom's condition. I listened from the hallway as she discussed Mom's medical status, as if she had the right to receive such information. "Yes, doctor. I understand that Linda probably has less than a week left," Rebecca said into the phone. Yes, I'll make sure Michael is prepared for what's coming. We've been discussing arrangements. When Dad returned from his brief walk around the block, something Rebecca had encouraged to clear his head. I was waiting with my phone ready to record. Dad, Doctor. Peterson called with an update about Mom, I said. Oh good, what did he say? Dad asked. He didn't talk to me. He talked to Rebecca. Dad looked confused. That's impossible. Rebecca doesn't have medical authorization. Actually, she does, Rebecca said, appearing in the doorway. Michael, you signed the forms last week, remember? You were so upset after your mother's last appointment that you asked me to handle communications with the medical team so you wouldn't have to deal with the stress. I watched Dad's face as he tried to remember signing such forms. Rebecca had manipulated him during an emotional moment, and now she had legal authority to make medical decisions about my mother. Dad, you never mentioned signing any forms, I said. I was very upset that day, Dad said slowly. Rebecca was just trying to help. Show me the forms, I demanded. Rebecca hesitated for just a moment too long. Sarah, I don't think this is the time to get bogged down in paperwork. Your mother needs our focus right now. Show me the forms, Rebecca. Sarah, you're being unreasonable. Show me the forms. My shouting brought Dad's attention back to the conversation. For the first time in weeks, I saw a flicker of clarity in his eyes. Rebecca, maybe you should show Sarah the documents, Dad said quietly, just to clear up any confusion. Rebecca realized she had no choice. She went to Dad's office and returned with a folder. Inside were several official-looking documents that granted Rebecca Martinez power of attorney for medical decisions regarding Linda Thompson. But as I examined the papers more closely, I noticed something odd about the signatures. Dad, is this your signature? I asked, pointing to the line where he had supposedly signed. Dad studied the signature carefully. It looks like my signature, but what? The date on this document is from 2 months ago, but I don't remember signing anything 2 months ago. 2 months ago, your mother was still having good days. Why would I have signed medical power of attorney documents when she was still able to make her own decisions? Rebecca's face had gone pale. Michael, you were very emotional during that period. You might not remember everything clearly. I pulled out my phone and opened the recording I had made of Rebecca's conversation with Miguel. Dad, I need you to listen to something, I said. Sarah, this really isn't the time, Rebecca started. No, this is exactly the time, I interrupted, hitting play on the recording. Rebecca's voice filled the room. See, mi amor, everything is going perfectly. The old woman has maybe 2 weeks left, and then we'll have everything. The house, the business, all of it. Dad's face went white as he listened to Rebecca discussing his assets with another man, referring to Mom as the old woman, and planning to steal everything he had worked for. Michael, I can explain, Rebecca began. Keep listening, Dad, I said, letting the recording continue. Miguel's voice. You're brilliant, mi vida. How much do you think we'll get for the house? Rebecca's response. At least 800, zardorar, maybe more. And Michael's construction business is worth over 2 million. Once we're married, I'll have access to everything. Then we can sell it all and move to Costa Rica like we planned. Dad sank into a chair, his face a mask of shock and betrayal. The woman he had trusted with his dying wife's care, the woman he had been developing feelings for, was planning to steal his entire life's work. There's more, I said, letting the recording continue to play Rebecca's discussion about manipulating Dad's will and having me declared mentally unstable. When the recording ended, the room was silent except for the sound of Dad's heavy breathing. Michael, you have to understand, Rebecca said desperately. That recording is taken out of context. Sarah is manipulating the situation to make me look bad because she's jealous of our friendship. Our friendship? Dad said, his voice barely a whisper. You called my dying wife the old woman. You're planning to steal my business and my house. You have a boyfriend who's helping you rob me blind. That's not. I can explain everything, Rebecca stammered. Then explain the forged power of attorney documents, I said, pulling out additional evidence I had gathered. Explain why you've been researching my dad's assets with real estate agents. Explain why you've been asking Mom about her jewelry. Explain why you moved Miguel into your apartment 3 months ago even though you told us you were single. Rebecca's composure finally cracked completely. You have no idea what you've done, she hissed at me. Your father needed someone strong to help him through this. He needed someone who could make the hard decisions and help him move forward with his life. You're just a child who can't accept that your daddy might need a woman's touch. A woman's touch? Dad said, standing up slowly. You call robbing me blind a woman's touch? I've been taking care of this family for months, Rebecca shouted. I've sacrificed my own life to be here for you. I deserve compensation for everything I've given up. You've been planning to steal from me since the day you walked into this house, Dad said, his voice gaining strength. You've been using my wife's illness as cover for an elaborate con game. Your wife was going to die anyway, Rebecca screamed, finally showing her true nature. I just made sure you wouldn't be alone when it happened. I made sure you'd have someone to take care of you. The cruelty of her words hung in the air like poison. This woman had been in our house every day for months, pretending to care for my dying mother while planning to rob our family blind. Get out, Dad said quietly. Michael, you're making a mistake. You need me. Get out of my house, Dad roared with more force than I had heard from him in months. Get out and never come back. If I see you near my family again, I'll have you arrested for fraud and forgery." Rebecca looked between Dad and me, realizing that her carefully constructed plan had completely fallen apart. The grieving widower she thought she could manipulate had found his strength, and the suspicious daughter she thought she had neutralized had outmaneuvered her. "You'll regret this," Rebecca said as she gathered her things. "Both of you will regret this." "The only thing I regret," Dad said, "is that I let you into my home while my wife was dying. I regret that I trusted you with my family's most vulnerable moments. I regret that Linda died thinking her best friend loved her when you were really just waiting for her to get out of your way." As Rebecca left our house for the final time, slamming the door behind her, Dad collapsed back into his chair and began to cry. Not just for Mom's condition, but for the betrayal of someone he had trusted completely. I sat beside him and put my arm around his shoulders, feeling like I had my real father back for the first time in months. "I'm so sorry, Sarah," he whispered. "I'm so sorry I didn't believe you." "It's okay, Dad. She was very good at what she did." "How did you know? How did you figure it out?" "Because I love you and Mom too much to let anyone take advantage of our family," I said. "And because women like Rebecca always make the same mistake. They underestimate the people they're trying to manipulate." For the first time since Mom's diagnosis, Dad and I were united again, ready to face whatever came next as a family. The first thing we did after Rebecca left was change all the locks on our house. Dad called a 24-hour locksmith service, and by midnight, every door had new deadbolts. We also changed every password she had access to: banking, email, insurance accounts, everything. "I can't believe I gave her access to all of this," Dad said as we worked through the security updates on his laptop. "Sarah, I don't know how I became so blind to what was happening. She's a professional, Dad. This wasn't her first time manipulating a grieving family." The next morning, Dad called our family lawyer, James Morrison, to explain what had happened and review all the documents Rebecca had influenced. The forged power of attorney was obviously fraudulent. The signature was close, but a handwriting expert would easily prove it wasn't Dad's. "Michael, you need to understand how serious this is," Mr. Morrison said during our emergency meeting. "Rebecca Martinez committed multiple felonies here: document forgery, financial fraud, elder abuse. The district attorney would definitely prosecute if you want to press charges." "What would that involve?" Dad asked. "Criminal charges, a full investigation, possibly recovering any money she gained access to. But it would also mean police interviews, court testimony, and a lot of public attention during an already difficult time." Dad looked exhausted at the thought of adding legal proceedings to everything else we were dealing with. "I just want her gone, James. I don't want to put Sarah and Linda through the stress of a criminal trial, but I had different feelings about letting Rebecca get away with what she had done." "Dad, what about the next family she targets? What about the next dying woman whose husband she decides to steal?" Mr. Morrison nodded gravely. "Sarah raises an excellent point. Women like Rebecca Martinez rarely stop after one victim. She has a pattern of behavior that suggests she'll continue targeting vulnerable families." We decided to file a police report documenting everything that had happened, but to hold off on pressing criminal charges until after Mom's situation resolved. At least there would be an official record of Rebecca's fraud attempts if future victims needed evidence of her pattern. The impact on our family's finances was significant, but not devastating. Rebecca had gained access to about $15,000 from various accounts, money she had transferred by claiming it was for medical expenses that were never actually paid. Our lawyer assured us this money could be recovered through civil action. More troubling was discovering how extensively Rebecca had researched our assets. She had copies of property deeds, business valuations, insurance policies, and investment account statements. She knew exactly how much our family was worth, and had clearly been planning which assets to target first. "She was going to suggest I sell the house within 6 months of your mother's death," Dad told me as we reviewed Rebecca's notes. She had already researched comparable sales in the neighborhood and identified the most profitable time to list the property. But the most disturbing discovery was in Rebecca's phone records, which the police obtained as part of their preliminary investigation. She had been in contact with Miguel for over 8 months, long before Mom's condition had deteriorated to the point where she needed extra care. Rebecca hadn't swooped in to help a family in crisis. She had been monitoring our situation since Mom's initial diagnosis, waiting for the perfect moment to implement her plan. The next few days brought unexpected support from people we hadn't expected. Word spread quickly through our neighborhood about what had happened, and several families came forward with their own concerns about Rebecca's behavior. Mrs. Chen, our neighbor 3 houses down, knocked on our door 2 days after Rebecca's confrontation. "Sarah, I hope you don't mind me asking, but was Rebecca Martinez the woman who was always at your house during your mother's illness?" "Yes, why?" "Because she approached me at the grocery store last month asking very detailed questions about your family's routine. She wanted to know what time your father left for work, whether you lived at home, how your mother was doing. At the time, I thought she was just being neighborly. But now..." Mrs. Chen's revelation made us realize that Rebecca had been conducting surveillance on our family, gathering intelligence about our daily patterns and vulnerabilities. Even more disturbing, we learned that Rebecca had been telling people in our community that she was practically family, that she was helping to manage the household during Mom's illness. She had been establishing herself as a legitimate part of our lives in the eyes of our neighbors and friends. The emotional impact on Dad was severe. The guilt he felt about being manipulated while Mom was dying was eating him alive. "I betrayed your mother," he told me one evening as we sat by Mom's bedside. "I let another woman into our bed while Linda was fighting for her life one room away. Dad, you were grieving and vulnerable. Rebecca deliberately targeted you during the worst time of your life. But I should have seen it. I should have listened to you. I should have protected our family." It took several long conversations to help Dad understand that he had been the victim of a sophisticated predator. Rebecca had studied his psychological profile, identified his weaknesses, and exploited them with surgical precision. Mom, during her brief wakeful periods, was surprisingly relieved when we told her what had happened. "I knew something was wrong," she whispered. Rebecca's eyes, they were always calculating, always watching. "I was starting to think I was imagining things because of the medication." "Why didn't you say more about it?" I asked. "Because I was dying, and I thought maybe I was just jealous that another woman was taking care of my family. I didn't trust my own judgment anymore." The saddest part was that Mom had been questioning her own sanity, instead of trusting her instincts about Rebecca's true nature. The manipulation had been so thorough that even the victim doubted herself. A week after Rebecca's expulsion, we received a threatening letter from her lawyer, demanding that Dad honor his verbal commitments to help with her transition expenses after her dedicated service to our family. The letter claimed that Dad had promised to help Rebecca financially after Mom's death, and that backing out of this commitment constituted breach of verbal contract. Our lawyer's response was swift and uncompromising. Mr. Morrison sent a cease and desist letter detailing Rebecca's fraudulent activities and threatening immediate criminal prosecution if she attempted any further contact with our family. "She's desperate," Mr. Morrison explained. "Her plan failed, and now she's trying to salvage something from the situation." The threatening letter is actually good news. It shows she has no other legal recourse. But we also learned that Rebecca's desperation made her potentially dangerous. Miguel had been arrested on an unrelated warrant the day after Rebecca was expelled from our house, leaving her without her criminal partner and facing the collapse of their entire scheme. Dr. Peterson, Mom's oncologist, called to apologize for the confusion about Rebecca's medical authority and to assure us that all her access to Mom's medical information had been revoked. "I should have verified her authority more carefully," Dr. Peterson said, "but she seemed so knowledgeable about Linda's condition and so concerned about the family's well-being. She had answers to questions that typically only family members would know." "That's because she had been living in our house and monitoring Mom's condition for months," I explained. "I want you to know that we've implemented new protocols to prevent this type of situation in the future. No one will have access to patient information without proper legal documentation that's been verified by our legal department." The medical community's response was swift. Within days, every hospital and clinic in our area had been alerted about Rebecca's fraudulent activities. If she tried to target another family dealing with serious illness, medical professionals would be prepared to identify and stop her. 3 weeks after Rebecca's expulsion, Mom's condition began deteriorating rapidly. The stress of the Rebecca situation seemed to have accelerated her decline, and Dr. Peterson told us that she probably had only days left. But there was a strange peace in our house now that Rebecca was gone. Dad was present and focused on Mom's needs instead of being distracted by another woman's manipulations. I could care for Mom without worrying about someone undermining my decisions or questioning my judgment. Most importantly, Mom could die with dignity, surrounded by family members who truly loved her, instead of having her final days contaminated by someone who saw her death as a business opportunity. On Mom's last lucid day, she squeezed my hand and whispered, "Thank you for protecting our family. Thank you for being strong when I couldn't be. I love you, Mom. I love you too, sweetheart. Take care of your father. He's going to need time to heal from this betrayal, but he's a good man. Don't let what Rebecca did make either of you afraid to trust people again." 2 days later, Mom passed away peacefully in her sleep, holding Dad's hand, with me sitting beside her bed. Her last words were, "I love you," directed at both of us. Rebecca Martinez had tried to steal our family's love, trust, and resources during our darkest time. But in the end, she had only made us stronger and more united. Mom died knowing that her family had protected each other and that the woman who had tried to destroy us had failed completely. As we began planning Mom's funeral, Dad and I worked together as a real father-daughter team for the first time in months. Rebecca's manipulation had temporarily broken our bond, but overcoming her scheme had made us closer than ever. The predator who had tried to feast on our family's grief had instead taught us just how strong we were when we stood together. 6 months after Mom's funeral, our lives had found a new rhythm. Dad and I had learned to navigate our grief together, supporting each other through the waves of sadness that still hit us unexpectedly. The Victorian house on Elm Street felt peaceful again, filled with memories of Mom instead of the toxic energy Rebecca had brought into our home. Dad returned to work gradually, rebuilding his construction business with a renewed focus and energy. The experience with Rebecca had taught him to trust his instincts better and to value the people who truly cared about him. I learned something important about myself, Dad told me over dinner one evening. I learned that grief can make you vulnerable in ways you never expect. But I also learned that having people who love you enough to fight for you, even when you can't see the danger yourself, is the most valuable thing in the world. The legal resolution with Rebecca came 8 months after her expulsion from our house. She had attempted to target 2 other families in neighboring counties, but the alert system our lawyer had helped establish caught her before she could cause significant damage. Faced with criminal charges in multiple jurisdictions, Rebecca accepted a plea deal that included full restitution to our family, 5 years probation, and mandatory registration as a financial predator. Miguel was deported back to Colombia after serving 6 months for immigration violations. Their elaborate scheme to steal Dad's assets and flee to Costa Rica had completely collapsed. Justice doesn't always look the way you expect, Mr. Morrison told us when the legal proceedings concluded, but sometimes it's enough to know that the people who tried to hurt you can't hurt anyone else. The $15 Rebecca had stolen was returned with interest, but more importantly, her criminal record would follow her for the rest of her life. Any future family she tried to target would be able to discover her history with a simple background check. Dr. Peterson called several months later to tell us that the new protocols implemented because of our case had already prevented 3 similar situations at area hospitals. Medical facilities now required court-verified documentation before allowing non-family members access to patient information, and staff were trained to recognize the warning signs of financial predators targeting vulnerable families. Your willingness to speak up about what happened has protected countless other families, Dr. Peterson said. Linda would be proud of the legacy you've created from such a difficult situation. Dad began dating again almost a year after Mom's death, but his approach was completely different now. He moved slowly, introduced me to anyone he was interested in, and never made major decisions about relationships without family input. The experience with Rebecca had taught him the value of transparency and the danger of isolating himself emotionally. I'll never again let anyone drive a wedge between me and the people who really love me, he promised. His new girlfriend, Carol, was a widow who had lost her husband 2 years earlier. She was kind, genuine, and respectful of Mom's memory. Most importantly, she encouraged Dad's relationship with me instead of trying to interfere with our family bond. I can tell Linda raised an incredible daughter, Carol told me the first time we met. Your father talks about you with such pride and gratitude. He says you saved his life. Carol had also experienced her own challenges with people who tried to take advantage of her vulnerability after her husband's death, so she understood the importance of protecting our family's emotional and financial security. The house became a place of healing rather than manipulation. Dad and I created a memorial garden for Mom in the backyard, planting her favorite roses and installing a bench where we could sit and remember her. The guest room that Rebecca had essentially claimed as her own was redecorated as a home office where Dad could work on his business projects. Most importantly, we learned to trust our instincts again. The experience with Rebecca had taught us that predators are skilled at exploiting our best qualities, our generosity, our trust, our love for family. But it had also shown us that families who communicate honestly and support each other can overcome even the most sophisticated manipulation. I returned to my apartment downtown, but visited Dad several times a week. Our relationship was stronger than it had ever been, built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared survival of a real crisis. You know what I realized? I told Dad one evening as we worked in Mom's garden. Rebecca thought she was so smart, so calculating. She studied our family for months, planned every move, anticipated every obstacle, but she made one crucial mistake. What's that? She underestimated how much we love each other. She thought she could turn us against each other, that she could make you choose between loyalty to her and loyalty to me. She never considered that our family bond was stronger than her manipulation. Dad smiled, dirt on his hands from planting new rose bushes. Your mother always said that love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice you make every day. Rebecca could manipulate feelings, but she couldn't change the choice we make to love and protect each other. The ripple effects of our experience continued to spread in positive ways. I started volunteering with a nonprofit organization that helped families navigate medical crises without falling victim to financial predators. My nursing background and personal experience made me effective at identifying warning signs and educating vulnerable families about protecting themselves. Dad donated money to establish a fund that provided legal assistance to families dealing with medical fraud. He often said it was the best investment he had ever made, turning our painful experience into protection for others. We can't change what Rebecca did to our family, Dad said, but we can make sure that what we learned helps other people avoid the same situation. The most profound change was in how we approached trust and relationships. We learned that healthy suspicion isn't paranoia, it's protection. We learned that people who truly care about you will welcome questions about their motives and won't try to isolate you from family who love you. Mom taught me something important in her final weeks. I shared with Dad one day. She said that when someone truly loves you, they want you to be surrounded by people who love you too. They don't try to become the only person you can depend on. Rebecca had tried to make herself indispensable to Dad by undermining every other relationship in his life. A loving partner, by contrast, would have strengthened his connections with family and friends. 3 years after Mom's death, Dad and Carol married in a small ceremony in our backyard, surrounded by family and friends who had supported us through our darkest time. It was a celebration of healing, new beginnings, and the triumph of authentic love over calculated manipulation. As I watched Dad dance with Carol at their reception, I thought about how different this moment was from what Rebecca had planned. Instead of a desperate widower being controlled by a predator, here was a healthy man who had worked through his grief and chosen to open his heart again to someone who genuinely cared about his well-being. The evening before the wedding, Dad and I sat on Mom's memorial bench, watching the sunset through her rose garden. "Do you think Mom would approve of Carol?" he asked. "I think Mom would be grateful that you found someone who makes you happy without trying to erase her memory or destroy our family," I replied. "Mom's dying wish was for you to be taken care of, but she meant by people who actually love you, not by people who want to use you." "I still think about Rebecca sometimes," Dad admitted. "Not with any longing, but just wondering how someone becomes so calculating, so willing to exploit other people's pain. I think people like Rebecca convince themselves that they're not really hurting anyone, that they're just taking advantage of opportunities. But what they don't understand is that families like ours have something they'll never have: real love that makes us stronger instead of weaker." 4 years later, I'm married to David, a fellow nurse who understands the importance of family bonds and who loves hearing stories about Mom. Dad and Carol have been happily married for 2 years and often host family dinners in the house where so much healing has taken place. The house on Elm Street is filled with laughter again, with the voices of people who genuinely care about each other. Mom's presence is felt in every room, not as a source of sadness, but as a reminder of the love that built this family and the strength that protected it. Sometimes I drive past the neighborhood where Rebecca used to live and wonder if she ever thinks about our family, if she ever regrets the choices that led to her downfall. But mostly, I don't think about her at all. She was a chapter in our story, but she wasn't the ending. Our story ends with love triumphing over manipulation, with family bonds proving stronger than carefully calculated schemes, and with the knowledge that sometimes the people who try to destroy you actually end up making you stronger. Mom died believing that her family would take care of each other, and she was right. Rebecca Martinez thought she could steal that legacy, but she only helped us discover how powerful it really was. The woman who tried to replace my mother's love discovered that some things in this world simply cannot be replaced, replicated, or stolen. They can only be earned through years of genuine care, sacrifice, and unconditional devotion. Rebecca wanted to inherit a life she hadn't built and love she hadn't earned. Instead, she learned that true family bonds are forged in crisis and strengthened by those who stand together when everything is falling apart. What do you think about this story? Have you ever experienced someone trying to manipulate your family during a vulnerable time? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you faced a similar situation, I'd love to hear how you protected your loved ones. Remember that trusting your instincts and communicating with family can save you from people who see your pain as their opportunity. Thank you for reading our story, and thank you for being part of this community where we can share these important experiences.